Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. And as always, I'm your host, the Game Master. And today we're talking about Iron Man. But before we get into that, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, and leave a comment. We've got a great community here, and it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. The prologue to this one takes place in March of 1963 when Tony Stark is in a Stark Industries lab demonstrating a new magnetic tractor beam for a United States Army general. Tony uses the small device to rip the heavy metal door off of a vault. The general is sold on it, and Stark's gadgets are sent to Vietnam. They ask Stark to fly over too to teach the soldiers how to use them and how to fix it if anything goes wrong in the field. While walking through the jungle one day, Tony Stark's foot catches on the wire of a booby trap. This triggers an explosion, and enemy soldiers take Stark to their leader, a man named Wong Chu. Tony wakes up in a lab in North Vietnam. Chu is a heavy-set man who's balding on top. He tells Tony that if he designs weapons for him, he'll have his surgeons save Tony's life. Tony knows it's a lie, but plays along and says that he'll do as he's told. So Wong Chu places another prisoner in the room with Tony, a man named Professor Yin Sen. Tony refers to Yin Sen as the greatest physicist of all time and says he read his works in college. Tony also says the world thought Yin Sen died. The old man says he's not dead, just a prisoner. And so, with the materials they were given to build weapons, Stark and Yinsen instead built the torso of the Mark I Iron Man armor. And using magnetism, the situation with the shrapnel in Tony's heart is under control for the moment. Time passes, and they build the rest of the armor. Tony puts it all on, but as the generator is coming to power, the enemies draw near. So Yin Sen distracts them, and in doing so, he gives his life so that Tony may live. The Iron Man armor comes online, and Tony fights his way out of the area. As enemies open fire on him, Tony takes them out left and right using his magnetic repulsor rays. He also uses magnetic tractor beams to pull the metal stilts off of what are basically deer stands, causing the shooters to fall to the jungle floor. After all his enemies are defeated, Tony Stark trudges off through the jungle, hoping to find American forces so he can go home. Which brings us to the main plot of this game session. At an airport, paparazzi swarm Tony Stark as he gets off of a green military helicopter. They ask him about his ordeal, and Tony says he's very tired and doesn't feel well, and that all he wants is a good old-fashioned American cheeseburger. After wading through the chaos of the media vultures, Tony gets home, where he's greeted by his secretary, Pepper Potts, who was worried sick about him. He thanks her for her concern and gets a hot shower. Tony is, of course, bothered by the new gear that keeps him alive, but as he looks at it, his mind also begins to think about what sort of armor he could have made with the resources he has in his own lab instead of the scraps he was given in North Vietnam. So Tony heads down to the lab and sets to work building the Mark II armor. This version is gold colored and boosts all of his physical attributes to higher levels than the gray Mark I armor did. The Mark I gave Tony body armor, absorption, magnetic control, and life support, while the Mark II now does all of that, as well as flight, energy blasts, electronic countermeasures, a fire extinguisher, digging, holographic projection, infrared vision, sensors, and sonic generation. So Tony takes the new armor out for a spin, and he flies over a town called Granville. He spots a super-powered being who looks sort of like a caveman. This being is called Gargantus, and in addition to his massive size and strength, his eyes glow yellow, and he tries to use hypnosis on Tony Stark. The attempt fails, and Tony falls back while Gargantus pursues him. Tony realizes the villain has already used hypnosis on everyone else in Granville, but he realizes something else too. Gargantus is actually a robot. So Tony uses his magnetic control, and Gargantus is torn apart. Overhead, a flying saucer is hidden within a cloud, and the green-skinned aliens inside comment that when their race came to Earth long ago, they found Neanderthals here. So, due to a miscalculation, their would-be Terminator didn't really do a great job of blending in with the modern population. They also mistakenly assumed that there are many Iron Men who protect the Earth, so they leave. The townsfolk of Granville are no longer hypnotized, and Tony returns home to make some repairs and keep working out the kinks of his new design. More time passes, and Iron Man has all sorts of weird adventures throughout 1963. He meets Doctor Strange, fights gangsters, encounters Kala, Queen of the Underworld, a woman named Cleopatra, and a guy named Jack Frost. Then in October of 63, in the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev pays a visit to the lab of Professor Vanko, who in turn reveals the Crimson Dynamo armor he's been working on. Vanko brings out a robot duplicate of Iron Man, which he uses a rheostat on, causing the robot to explode into shreds. Then he destroys a tank. Khrushchev is impressed and sends him to the United States. A couple of weeks go by, and Stark Industries has an Apollo-style rocket called the Y-69, which launches, and the Crimson Dynamo uses his magnetic control on the spacecraft. So Iron Man flies into action and grabs the rocket, struggling to stabilize it. He succeeds, and it splashes down. Stark's men recover the rocket and bring it in to be examined, and they're confused when they find that every single electrical connection has been burned to a cinder. As Stark Industries continues their investigation, the Crimson Dynamo attacks multiple Stark factories. Since Stark is a weapons supplier, this hurts America and is in the best interests of the USSR. In Washington, D.C., the suits talk about this, and they think it's odd that only Stark is being targeted. One of them suggests Stark might be secretly a communist, and he's doing this intentionally. So they begin to investigate him. After that, the Crimson Dynamo hits Stark's research center, and this time, Iron Man answers the challenge. And when the Crimson Dynamo tries to fry Tony's armor, it is met with a force field. Tony took precautions, and on his turn, he punches the Crimson Dynamo, doing a few points of damage. Then Vanko hits Stark, doing a few points of damage, and ultimately what follows is basically rock'em sock'em robots until Iron Man is the last man standing. Vanko is knocked out and turned over to the U.S. military, and for the time being, since Iron Man is thought to be Stark's employee, it shows the suits whose side Tony is really on. So the men in Washington turn their attention to other matters. Which brings us to the epilogue of this game session, which takes place in November of 1963. JFK is in Dallas, Texas, in a parade, and nearby is the comedian, aka Edward Eddie Blake, who takes the shot and stuns the world. Tony Stark and Pepper Potts watch on TV, and Pepper cries and buries her head in Tony's shoulder. Iron Man swears that he and others like him will find out who did this, and JFK will be avenged. And that was it for this game session. Hopefully you found it to be interesting. If so, and if you'd like to support our channel, be sure to hit like, subscribe, ring the bell, and as always, leave a comment. From all of us here at the longest running superhero RPG on Earth, we hope that all of you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.